So Monika Zawadzki lives in Warsaw. She studied graphic art at the Warsaw Academy of Fine Arts. But she developed her work in opposition to her formal education. She received her PhD from the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw, and currently she is an assistant professor in the Department for Visual Communication at the Academy of Fine Arts in Szczecin. She was also art director of a seminal art gay magazine called Dick Magazine and pop culture and lifestyle K magazine. Her works are in the collection of Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź, Zachęta National Gallery of Art in Warsaw, Center for Contemporary Art in Warsaw, and in the city of Auroville in India. We have a long-term experience starting at the Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź, which is the museum, the institution itself, is based on the legacy of avant-garde art, which is very influential for my work with contemporary artists. So the tradition of this place makes me to work with contemporary artists who are capable not only of critical reflection of social relations and politics, but think in a holistic manner about future to design a better society. And precisely Monika Zawadzki uses minimal forms, but not to play with aesthetics, with minimal aesthetics of design. She searches for the most basic and simple elements, grammas and formulas to create a non-utilitarian generic design for future bioethics of relations. Her sculptures, installations, paintings, graphic design conceive an order that estranges conventional modes of perceptions to suspend certain hierarchies in methodologies for organizing a common world. Similarly to historical avant-garde, we could say that she creates building plans for another world. Her method was called by Jarosław Lubiak, an art critic and curator, something as a generic design. In the same sense, this term is used as in programming of pharmaceutics. This design refers to entire species, classes or categories, for example, a human or a man or a woman, animal, objects. Unlike in case of typical design, here it is not about creating object fetishes, but forms for situations, relations and also identity. It is supposed to be generic design because it is not about proposing specific solutions for particular problems, but rather creating generic matrices or diagrams for types, kinds or categories of problems. In fact, the aim of Monika Zawadzki work is to create, to design a model for an environment for a community between living and non-living matter, humans, animals and machines, which would be not based on violence and profit-driven abuse discussed in this exhibition as cheap nature. The recurrent motif Monika Zawadzki works through in her work is industrial meat production. For her, this is the critical point of no return for human civilization. It is against this backdrop that Zawadzki designs this new generic humanity that is supposed to be self-annulling through a radical deprivation of individual features and equalization of other genera and kinds of beings. And the area of her interests resonates with many philosophical concepts in particular with feminist materialism, with Deleuze, with Guattari, but specifically with the area that Georgia Gambon and Rosie Braidotti describe as Zoe. While Zoe is a realm of natural life deprived of politics, language, reason, and its functions in the domain of the private household, oikos, bios stands for political life, articulation, language, public space. Zoe is an animating life force, dynamic self-organizing structure of life itself, of which anthropos or bios is just a very tiny segment. Zawadzki in her art politicizes Zoe and strips bios of its special value and position. Transgressing borders, she experiments with fluid states of becoming animal, machine, earth. Each exhibition of Monika Zawadzki is a manifesto. In this sense, she's really following the lines of avant-garde artists. It's a statement, it's a manifesto, it's articulation of her mindset. And during the exhibition, during the first large manifestation of her work, Anyone, in the Center for Contemporary Art, Monika Zawadzki made like her own statement. Czy mogłabyś go teraz puścić?
Actually, I cannot, because it's just to read.
Oh, sorry. So maybe if you could read, and then I will make the intro about the.
Yeah. Because I'm not a fan of speaking, so usually I just add some text to the exhibition, and then it's more precise. So here we got. The installation consists of objects, images, sounds, as well as emptiness, searching for an ideal form while assuming that interpretation remains subjective due to the predispositions, conditions, as well as the personal experience of a given recipient, attempting to create a self-made being based on a human and a cow with the use of a circle and a square, shapes which communicate peace and harmony, redesigning the human and animal body by brutally adjusting them to geometrical features. The process of creating lack and interest in anatomy and functionality. Positioning humans together with mammals, as well as analysis of the behavioral exterminants of social groups caused by psychological isolation of individuals and groups. The accommodation of a being as a form of self-enslavement as opposed to a longing for freedom in time and space. Sorry for my English, but this is too difficult. And, and usually I add some interviews, so maybe we will just give one text. And during this we will...
Does the title of the installation, Monica, mean to you? Zawadzki, Monica is a better version of Monica. You mentioned recently that you managed a store for a couple of months. Zawadzki, I have been unemployed for a long time, so my mum opened a store with expensive brows. It was called Monica. It was a nice store, big and modern. The simple interior was complemented by the large metal desk and a couple of coat hangers. People said it was a front, since no one ever bought anything. That sounds like what we're going through right now. Zawadzki, I had to look at women try on the bras. Because of my position, I was continually subjected to the sight of half-naked bodies, unabashed by my presence. You don't like naked women. Zawadzki, I don't like naked people, whether they be men or women. What type of women do you like? Zawadzki, since your question is specifically about women, you're asking me about typically female traits related to that particular sex. I avoid focusing on differences, postulating, instead, a life that's not gender-specific. That doesn't exist. Zawadzki, I don't understand. There is no such thing as a non-gender-specific life. Zawadzki, there is. Life takes place on many different levels. On the gender level, we only see a very minor part of a person. One's sex is determined by one's biology. Your forms are ideal. Zawadzki, what I do can be considered a subjective improvement of nature. In my case, I can't improve myself, only the graphic form of representing myself. That's why when I create a portrait of myself it is self-portrait with sausage, and not lady with an ermine. Why sausage? Zawadzki, I've always been fascinated by sausages. A half-alive form, clumped together from a shapeless mass, anonymous. What's surprising is that people love sausages and often even though they know where they come from. In the language of my art, meat can be considered a luxury item. What made you move away from graphic art and into space installation? Zawadzki, my boredom. Outside the gallery, there's a piece called Black Frieze, Zani Fries. Zawadzki, it's an abstract element. A black rectangle is a continuation of previous graphic design projects, as well as a proposal for a new look for the street. I think it's important that we clean up the city. In what way? Zawadzki, every building downtown would have its own Black Frieze, designed on an individual basis. In a way, it's my interpretation of Mike Patton's Delirium Cordia. The installation only uses a small fragment of space. Why don't you use more space? Zawadzki, open space is a key element of the installation. I think it's elegant. And the sound? The sound doesn't have a physical form, but it does have a heaviness to it. The sculpture is the synthesis. Zawadzki, yes, definitely. The complementary elements make up the whole. In order to create this shape, I used the simplest of technical methods. I'm not interested in the spatial form in itself, although this space is the result of this work. The goal was not the creation of the sculpture itself, but the presentation of the illustrations in a three-dimensional form. Why Martin Margiela? Zawadzki, that was pretty much a coincidence. Margiela and the Antwerp 6 design clothes based on deconstruction. Zawadzki, I realized that working with a flat surface is very similar to what is commonly used in tailoring. Ideal forms really irritate me, so I destroy them, creating a new form in the process. I still think that your forms are romantic. Zawadzki, I don't imagine anyone will see any romanticism in my art. They present a sense of being disappointed with reality, with a denial of comfort. Zawadzki, I don't know if they deny comfort, or if I am disappointed with reality. I think they show a reality from which you're trying to distance yourself. Black images on a white background act as a warning. Zawadzki, black and white are the easiest media. If a certain complexity arises, it is not intentional, only a side effect. I don't know if I call it a warning. I don't want to warn anyone. What type of reaction would you like to see in a viewer? Zawadzki, any reaction apart from indifference. I'm interested in getting a reaction, not in indifference. A lack of a reaction equals failure. My art is not an answer, it's only the beginning of a discussion. Depending on the audience, one sometimes hears different, even extreme, conflicting interpretations. Some people, for instance, saw some of my graphic art as being feminist, while others saw it as misogynist. I find some similarity in your form to that of Russian constructivists. Zawadzki, getting through the basics of art history at school was a real struggle. The reason that constructivism differed from other avant-garde movements was its formal discipline, limited to simple geometric elements, the circle, the triangle, and the straight line. Constructivism owes its name to both its approach to building an image, constructing it from the said objects, as well as to its characteristic commitment to modernity. Zawadzki, when you started setting up the exhibition you talked about machines. I liked that. I see you graphic art as being somewhere between construction and deconstruction. Zawadzki, every form, even a deconstructed one, first has to be constructed in a precise manner. I prefer not to have obvious subject matter with an obvious message. I'd rather use intuitive outlines. So it's a deconstruction of content, not form. Zawadzki, it's a matter of understanding and accepting the fact that on a certain level of perception, the destruction of an ideal becomes important. Maybe it's reconstruction? Zawadzki, no, reconstruction has to do with restoration, repairing. This is destruction, the opposite. And what would this lead to? Zawadzki, to a different way of interpreting. I think that it's a deeper exploration of a theme, despite the formal controversy. Like reading a book from the middle. Zawadzki, well, not quite. Copyright January 2010.
Thank you.
Thank you very
so
much.
Thank you, Anna.
that is not so distant from our now. Animals, plants, and water have become scarce. On the cusp of Homo sapien extinction, personhood has radically transformed. The extractive logic and hierarchical world order that came in the wake of colonialism and which created the Frankenstein of the anthropos and its companion of capitalism led the planet Earth to a rebellion. Aided by waves, fire, tectonic plates, widespread famine, and disease, the anthropos has been responsible for the extermination of multiple generations. But those who survived came to realize that in order to remain, they would have to learn to reestablish a connection with the earth, with its creatures, with its plants, its fungi, its algae, its microbes. In this world, renewed attention to indigenous traditions and teachings have enabled a renewed social contract with life beyond the human. They have become our respected guides. Our travels to the future allowed us to observe and later participate in the elaborate rituals which play a significant role in this time-space's everyday life. Our greatest inspiration came from a new breed of healers. What today many may understand through a generic translation called shaman. These are spiritual healers, in tune with bodies, who listen for the songs the stars sing, and who, inspired by the ancients, have learned to fill life not with commodities, but with magic and hope in a present that they believe is worth fighting for. Our method of transportation was a green screen, a media portal through which we entered with cameras. Interestingly, it was not our decision to travel, but theirs. Sucking us through planes of parallel universes, our bodies' magnets adhered to flashes of light. And suddenly we arrived to welcoming dispositions. Upon our arrival, we were surprised to find that these beings, not humans, communicated in a language that appeared in synesthetic waves of color, smell, and sensation, not just in our heads, but all over our body, and even in our erogenous zones. A massage for the sensorium, for which there are no words to translate. Feel and watch, they summoned. Through affective waves, they asked us to learn. Take this message to your present. Help us change the past, they implored. Incommensurate pains, incommensurate traumas, a struggle to translate disparate affects across a myriad of diversity in bodies and places and times in a myriad of ways that makes it impossible not to lose your shit. I try to remember that this is not just now. I try to remember that we are not an teleological movement towards an end, that the past and the present and the future collide and entangle and knot together. And I remember reading about Cortázar and his men, and how surprised they were when, upon making contact with the multitudes of deer in Abya Yala, they thought them to be stupid because they did not flee. For the deer had not yet learned to fear man. Man who is different from the indigenous societies who lived with and ate the flesh of these creatures. For man, the man of rational enlightenment thought, the man identified by Sylvia Wynter, man whose superiority would wage a war of contagion, whose extractive logic would prey upon the land, upon the radical, upon the ephedra and its creatures. Creatures who are different than humans, creatures who are not the same as the anthropos. And I receive a flash from an Indio, from a healer whose videos my partner watches on YouTube, who teaches viewers to eat dirt from different sites to stay healthy. Just a little sprinkle of dirt in my mouth for my microbiome and for my ancestors. For the 8 to 12 souls that Mohan Rai explained were there in my body. Not 1, not 2, 8 to 12. But sometimes 1 or 2 get lost, and you feel it. You feel sick. And you know you have to call them back. He and Parvati Rai and Danashing showed me how. Did you know that there are technological sensors that find mass graves in the dirt? That they can map bodies in the earth with light and translate it into color? Will a device one day claim to map the unimaginable pain of the Selknam's geocide, where testicles and breasts were sold for European coins? I hope I will be able to grind it in a mortar and a pestle. I hope I will be able to place it under my tongue. I hope that it will download to that code that we have not yet discovered, that most of us mistakenly call DNA, that we believe we carry somewhere in our shell or in our bone, to transmit for the next generation, for those who survive, for the macaques and the others who will know how to weather the storm. Take the soil that's inside your hands. Please whisper it to it, the wish that you have. Please wish inside that cup of soil your dreams for a future that is not here, but that is right around the corner. Tell it your secrets. Tell it you're sorry. And then try to be engaged with the soil. This is where we come from. Thank you. I take no responsibility for eating soils, but if you want to try, I've heard that it's very healthy.